The script for this video, I've wrote and then rewritten 5 times now. I know what I want to say. I know what the video is going to be about. I just don't know how to put it down on paper. So I'm hoping that if I go Bill O'Reilly and saying, it, we'll do it live, maybe that'll help me get the words out and say the things that I want to say and not misconstrue off the points that I want to make today. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Catch the Game. If you're unfamiliar with the channel, I cover all 3 sports. I talk about NFL, MLB, NBA. That's all I really care about is sports in life. I have no other wantingness to do anything in life other than play sports, so I talk about them now. Today, I want to talk about only 2 of the 3 sports that I cover on this channel. We will be talking about the NBA and the MLB, and specifically, I want to talk about how do things like optimization and analytics, have they reached the final frontier, and have we finally fully figured out how to play basketball and play baseball at the highest level at its most efficient form? Just me saying the word analytics probably makes you want to stuff me into a locker. And I feel that a lot of people who talk about analytics or say, well, the percentages of this, sometimes, yeah, it makes me want to cram them into a locker too. But for today, hold back. And don't be that guy who takes selfies with sunglasses on in the car. You know what I'm talking about. To start today, I think I want to talk about MLB because this one's kind of the hardest one to talk about, simply because optimization has kind of led to imperfection even more, I guess. For optimization in the MLB, the way that I kind of interpret it is the perfect type of contact or the perfect type of pitch RPMs, like how many rotations you're getting on the ball and how hard you're hitting the ball, as well as if you're a hitter. So for instance, the best contact you can make on a ball is on the pull side with the barrel of the bat. Obviously, right? That makes the most sense. So to optimize and make the best version of contact possible, hitters are constantly nowadays trying to hit the ball on the pull side with the barrel of the bat. Innately, there is nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. Hitters are trying to maximize the contact they make to make it worthwhile more. It makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you so far. However, another consequence that comes along with trying to make optimized contact on the ball every time you swing is strikeouts. That's just objectively a thing. If you're always looking to make the best contact possible, you are going to miss the ball more simply because, well, the barrel's not that big on a bat. Obviously, you have hitters like Luis Arraez and, Xavier Edwards in Miami's kind of doing it now. They don't make optimized contact, but they still hit for high average. They get on base, and in Xavier Edwards' case, he steals bases with it. But for a guy like Luis Arraez, he doesn't consistently make the best contact in the world. His barrel rate is not the highest in the league, but guess what he does have? The highest batting average in the league, and he's consistently toward the top of the league in hits. But the pushback on that is that obviously Luis Arraez's hits don't really mean as much as Aaron Judge's hits. Even though Aaron Judge may never lead the league in batting average, Aaron Judge will consistently lead the league in home runs and extra base hits to an extent, as well as RBIs. I think there's room for both players in the MLB, obviously. I don't think every player should be Aaron Judge looking to hit 60 tanks per season. Not every player is 6'7", that kind of helps as well. But not every player should look to be Luis Arraez either. I think that is a special form of player that is generational in a certain skill set. Similarly to how the older generation always talks about why are there no more guys like Mr. Padre. They always ask, why is there no more Tony Gwynns in MLB? Why is there no guys who hit close to what Tony Gwynn was hitting back in his time? Simply put, Tony Gwynn was a generational contact hitter that knew where to place the ball consistently. He knew what to do with the ball. His swing was optimized for what he wanted to do. Big difference between Tony Gwynn and Luis Arraez is that at least Tony Gwynn could field his position. The common skill set between Luis Arraez and a Tony Gwynn is the fact that they're both going to hit for average, and they're both, well, neither one of them is going to hit for any pop whatsoever. They're both going to put up lower RBI numbers, but they're both good leadoff hitters that most teams would die to have. Table setters are necessary in baseball, but what I'm trying to get at here is basically, has the sport of baseball been optimized? Most hitters that aren't Luis Arraez are trying to consistently hit the ball with the barrel of the bat and get it on their pull side, hit more home runs, hit more doubles, stuff like that. So what I guess I'm trying to ask is have we figured it out? Is there a better way to make contact more consistently? Is there another way that players should be swinging to optimize and make the best version of contact possible? I really don't think there is. The issue is that obviously you're not going to make that contact all the time. There's no such thing as a hitter hitting over 350 consistently, much less 300 in general. But it's meant to optimize your contact quality. Contact quality is a big thing in the MLB as well. Players who typically don't hit the ball as hard, don't have higher launch angles, say they hit the ball on the ground more, and they don't hit the ball as hard, their exit velos aren't as high. They typically don't stay in MLB long because typically they just don't hit well. But are launch angles and exit velos, is that the final frontier of like baseball statistics? Is there going to be something that comes along later and becomes like the standard for what a good hitter, a great hitter looks like? Because there's good hitters in MLB that can hit over 300. I mean, guys like Andres Jimenez are similar to Luis Ariz. They just don't put up the same average. But you still see people like Jeff Fry on Twitter. Hey, Jeff Fry, for watching this. Just kidding. We aren't friends. F you. A guy like Jeff Fry will tell you, wow, hitters today just suck, man. They don't hit as many singles as they used to. That's objectively true. It is. Players today do not hit as many singles as they did back in the 90s, 80s, most other eras. It's true. But hitters today do also average more RBIs per game, more runs per game, less double plays, and more total runs scored. And that's because they are optimizing the quality of their swings. I don't know, man. I don't know. Is that the final frontier for baseball? Is optimizing your swing quality equals more runs scored? Because that's kind of what it seems right now. Even in a year where hitting has been atrocious. League-wide hitting has been terrible in MLB this year. It's not really an opinion. That's kind of a fact. But even then, RBIs per game and runs per game are higher than most years in the 80s. I don't know what else to say about that. Hitting this year is considered down and bad, and yet it still rivals most years in the 80s, if not just beats them altogether. Right now, I'm looking at MLB year-by-year batting averages, not just batting averages, but like probabilities as well. So doubles per year and doubles allowed, triples allowed, home runs allowed per year, RBIs per game, and stuff like that. Obviously, singles are down. You compare it to the 80s, you see, 1985, there was 6.12 singles per game on average, as comparatively to this year, it's 5.34. Obviously, there's less singles hit. However, doubles in the year 2024 is at 1.61. I scroll down, I see 1992, 156, 1991, 154, 1990, 155, 1.5, 1.52, 1.61. The only year that really rivals it is 1987. But like I said, obviously league-wide OPS has been abysmal. The hardest part is comparing, though. The hardest part about comparing eras, in my opinion, like a guy like Jeff Fry does, is the fact that he likes to point to the 90s and the 2000s and say, look at how much better the play was in the 90s and the 2000s, in the early 2000s. There's one issue with that. There was Needles. There was Juice. There was Bonds. There was Canseco. There was Sosa. There was McGuire. There was a bunch of Brady Anderson. Was it Brady Anderson or was that the quarterback? I always forget. But either way, those guys were juiced up. And so it's much harder to compare 2024, a year where balls have been deadened. That is a real thing. Compared to back in 01 per se, where Barry Bonds hit 72 home runs. And now the only way you really can compare those eras is if you compare them to a time where MLB players were given, honestly, their equivalent of steroids, and that's considered 2019 the juiced ball. Basically, the ball was given steroids. Offensive numbers from 2019 almost rival steroid era. Like you see, runs per game on average is 4.83 in 2019. Back in 2001, it was 4.78. It's actually higher than it was the year Barry Bonds hit 72 goddamn homers. Again, 4.83 was the runs average for 2019 offenses. You go down to the late 90s, you see 4.85 in 95, 4.6 in 93, 4.79 in 98. It rivaled that. You want to know why? Because it was juiced balls and steroids. Obviously, Moneyball was a big contributor in the MLB when talking about why the game has changed so much over the years. You see the more emphasis on getting on base as well. Even Chipper Jones admitted it, even though, again, he's talking to that same bastard, Jeff. He even said they focus on getting on base and hitting for power, but then he doubles back and goes, well, because he realized, guess what he did? He popped his own argument. He said players don't focus on getting on base anymore, and then literally in that same interview says they scout based on how you get on base and hit home runs. Obviously, the future of baseball isn't just three true outcomes. We know that now. It's shifted way too much back in like 18, 19. Well, that's also because the juice ball was around, but the game has shifted away from three true outcome and back to like two strike approaches where people are choking up on bats again. You see that now. Maybe not choking up, but just prioritizing contact with two strikes. But is there really another evolution to this game other than trying to hit the ball as hard as possible and optimizing your launch angles and your exit velocities? Is that kind of the end of it? I mean, maybe bat speed becomes more of a thing because StatCast now has that. but I don't see it. I don't see another stat that can come along and sort of push out this era of exit velos and launch angles. I really don't think that there's another thing that's coming. Like in 20 years, what will we be talking about in terms of what makes a great baseball player? Nowadays, we talk about it and we say things like barrels, launch angles, exit velos, stuff like that because, well, guess what? The higher the exit velo, probably the higher the OPS. But in 2040, are we going to be talking about, barrel rates and exit velos still, or is there another phase that's coming that we haven't seen yet? I don't know. To me, it feels like we finally did kind of crack the code and figure out, well, what makes an effective baseball player, how hard they hit the ball. And this whole time I focused on hitting. I've completely forgotten pitching. Pitching aspect of it, nowadays it's power pitching, meaning higher velos, meaning higher spin rates. When they scout pitchers, they look to see who has the best spin rates. They don't always check velos because velo is pretty common now, but realistically think about it. The pitchers who've been put on very high pedestals by former generations, a majority have been power pitchers. Me and my dad talk about this a lot because he's kind of traditionalist in that same sense too, but I've often told him like, hey, the pitchers you've told me about from your era, Nolan Ryan, Bob Gibson, J.R. Richard, Roger Clemens, Pedro, Randy, those guys threw gas, hard, consistently. Even closers, Lee Smith, threw gas. A lot of the generational pitchers from back in the day were hard throwers. People, what was it, Christy Mathewson? That was the hard thrower from like the 40s, or he was like the 20s maybe. But a lot of the pitchers specifically that have been put on this very high echelon, it's really just Greg Maddux and a bunch of power pitchers. If I go up and I ask most people who the greatest pitcher of all time is, a lot of them will give me a different answer. Some people will say Randy Johnson. That's probably my pick. He won 4 straight Cy's, for Christ's sake. Some will say Pedro. Some will say Clemens. Some will say Bob Gibson. Like I said, a lot of those guys are just power pitchers. You'll hear the Maddux every once in a while, but nobody's going around claiming the best pitcher of all time is Oral Hershiser. Sorry. So again, I would like to just ask, is this the final frontier for pitching as well? How we judge spin rates and velocity is how valuable a pitcher is. Guys like Spencer Strider, who throw hard and have nasty stuff, or Chris Sale, who still throws 97 plus. He throws heat. And those guys are considered some of the best pitchers in baseball. But again, in 15 years, is there going to be another stat that comes along and dethrones RPMs and velo as the thing for pitchers? I don't think it's going to reverse trend anytime soon. I don't think there's going to be more Madduxes showing up. The last point about hitting that I did want to make as well is I found this graph that I'm going to put up on screen so that way you guys can see it as well, but it's four-seam fastballs faced by Miggy Cabrera from 09 to 2012. Those are his pinnacle Triple Crown years. And then it's against four-seam fastballs Aaron Judge has seen from 2021 to 2024, his peak. Literally on the graph, you can see it right there. Almost 30% of pitches that Miggy Cabs faced were about 90 miles per hour or less. So the amount of fastballs 90 miles per hour or less that Miggy Cabrera saw during that same time frame is about the same amount of 95 to 96 mile per hour fastballs Aaron Judge faced around that time. I am very much tired of hearing people like Jeff Fry, again, up yours, buddy, talk about how hitters today suck, they're taught wrong fundamentals. Buddy, you never faced this. They've never faced this before. I'm talking about, you can't see my screen, but I'm circling the Aaron Judge one. Nobody's seen this before. Before the 2010s, you rarely saw a 95, 96. Nowadays, look at Aaron Judge, man. He saw 419 pitches at 95 to 96 miles per hour. 419 fastballs, sorry. Miggy Cabrera saw 294. That's over 100 more pitches. So on average, hitters today face higher velos than ever. And that's comparing it to Miggy Cabrera in 2009 to 2012. Imagine if we stretch that back from Kirk Gibson during his prime years, or Eddie Murray. I'd be curious to see how many fastballs at 95 to 96 Eddie Murray saw versus Aaron Judge. It's probably a lot more for Aaron Judge, and I think deep down in your heart, you know that, even if you dislike the point I'm making. This is why I hate people like Jeff Fry, because they talk about MLB players from today's game, and he speaks as if he's seen pitching of today. Meanwhile, he hasn't played since like 02. You can't speak on what hitters today are seeing and what your knowledge is, because pitching today has changed 10 times more Pitching today is 10 times different than he'd ever seen in his career. Pitching today is 10 times different than he ever saw when he was training for his career especially. So why is it so hard for people of older generations to admit that hitting today is just harder? Fastballs are harder than ever thrown. So, of course, you have to make a decision quicker. A ball at 89 doesn't get to the plate the same speed as 95, and you know that. That's all I want to say about baseball. We'll move on to the NBA now. For the NBA, optimization has become spacing. Spacing is optimization. Can you get the most space on the court? I watched Missoula ball for, 82 games plus 4 or 5, 100 games almost. I watched damn near almost 100 games of Missoula ball last year. I know what spacing looks like. Is there going to be a play style eventually that comes along and kind of replaces spacing? You see now that teams are stylistically approaching the spacing differently. Teams like Minnesota have a stretch big who's basically a 7-footer in Cat. I think he might be like 6'11", close enough. But spacing is a huge thing in today's NBA, whether it's 4 out, 1 in, or a 5-out offense like the Celtics have run in years past. Spacing is the biggest, most commonly used word in the NBA nowadays, simply because it makes you harder to guard for a defense. You know, obviously the mid-range isn't dead. A lot of people like to think the mid-range is dead. It's just not. Players still use it. Stars still use it, I will say. Players, the common player doesn't use it as much. No, I don't want, Duncan Robinson taking a pull-up midi. I just don't want to see that. Stars still use the mid-range, though. Guys like De'Aaron Fox, Jaylen Brown, Bam Adebayo. I'm just coming off top here. Kevin Durant uses it, obviously, a ton. Devin Booker uses it a lot. I mean, there's a ton of stars that use the mid-range. Joel Embiid. So the mid-range is not dead. But what is dead is the idea of having 3 non-shooters on the floor. That is done. I watched games back in 08, dude. Why the was Rafe LaFrentz taking mid-ranges, catch and shoot mid-ranges from like 13 feet out? Why? Why did that exist? It was beautiful basketball, though. It was magical watching, guys like Desanya Diop take 20-footers. It made no sense, but it was hilarious and funny to watch. But again, have we reached the final frontier where it's all about how much space can you create on the court? How many threes can you get up is another big thing. How many corner threes specifically can you get up? That's the biggest one. If you could shoot more corner threes, or if you could just shoot at a higher clip than your opponent, typically you're going to win that game. More threes made. Kenny Beecham made a good video about it. I want to see if I'll be able to find it, and I'll just show it on screen right now. But he made a really good video basically saying, does the team that makes more threes always win the game? And no, they don't. But he also did find that it was like over 80%, I think, if I remember correctly. And that is definitely hard to swallow for some NBA fans out there who don't like the three-point shot. But let me tell you, some of these elite three-point shooting teams would outpace a majority, if not all, 2000s offenses. Things like the 2024 Celtics, they would have issues guarding, obviously, Shaq in the post, don't get me wrong. However, they'd probably outpace them pretty easily just by hitting about 20-something threes. It'd be over. They'd be able to keep the spacing and outspace the Lakers would of that generation. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed win, but I am saying is that more often than not, they'd probably win simply because of the spacing and the freedom of movement in 2024. That's another big thing. Freedom of movement. There's not much grabbing. Well, there is grabbing, but no hand checks, stuff like that. Freedom of movement has become a big thing in the NBA. But yeah, is spacing the final frontier of it? Getting up corner threes like Luka and them. They made the finals. Luka and them made the finals once their front office kind of realized what they needed to do. What they needed to do was bring in a lob big man who could sit in the paint and grab rebounds. That was Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively. I almost called him Isaiah Lively. That's Isaiah Likely, dingus. But yeah. And then guess what else they did with the rest of the roster? Shooter. They filled it out with shooters. That's all they did. It was a magical formula, and they made a finals run off of it just because they realized, hey, our star can't be stopped in space. And if you try to stop him in space, you're probably going to have to bring 2. And if you do, guess who's open? A shooter. I have no beef with this play style or anything like that. Some people really dislike when teams get a lot of threes up, but I don't think you would say that if your team won a championship doing it, would you? But yeah, the NBA section is definitely a little bit shorter, but do you think that there's another play style that's going to be coming along soon that's going to kind of destroy the spacing aspect of basketball? This is the one, the NBA is the one that I think has been kind of figured out. Players know what the optimized offense is like. It's driving kick. Driving kick is the perfect offense. If you can get penetration to the rim, force a defense to collapse in, and then you kick out to a shooter, that is the perfect offense. But I ever wonder, is there another change that can come to this game to where another style of play can outpace that drive and kick or that pace and space type. You could say that this video is just me kind of asking, is there a more efficient way to run a baseball team than the Moneyball strategy? And is there a more efficient way to run a basketball team than the Curry Ball strategy? Yeah, I'm going to start dubbing this generation Curry Ball, because that's what it is. Steph and Clay and Draymond kind of started this wave with Steve Kerr and them, and now everyone's doing it as well. But this is meant to be a kind of a discussion video, so I would like to see comments on if you think that there's another style of play that's coming to the MLB or the NBA that kind of takes away this optimization and shows you that there is another way to do it. Right now, it's a lot of like-mindedness going on in these sports organizations, and I don't mind it. I don't hate it. It's just natural progression. Everything gets better with more time that goes by. Not everything, let me tell you. Cosmic brownies have gotten 10 times worse as time has gone by. But think about like the earliest vaccines or whatever. Oh, now people are gonna be really mad I brought up vaccines. But like the earliest form of vaccines were probably killing people. And now like polio vaccine doesn't really kill people. I don't think it does. But yeah, you know what I mean? Like, as things go by, things get perfected more. These sports are no different. So yeah, let me know down in the comments. Do you think there's anything more that the NBA can do to kind of get away from this pace, space, and three-point kick-out shooting type of game? Or is it going to stay that way forever? Are we going to be building pace and space and corner kick-out shooting teams until the end of time? And in MLB, are we ever going to get away from the power pitching and power hitting aspect of the game and go back to a contact-oriented style? Probably not. Probably not. I don't see a team of 9 Luis Arises going anywhere. But yeah, let me know down in the comments. This was a free-form video. Like I said, I deleted the script like 5 times, and eventually I just got so frustrated with it. I said, I'm gonna go Bill O'Reilly and just do a fuck it, let's do it live thing. I threw on a camera, I turned the camera on, I turned my lights on, I said, all right, let me just sit down and start talking my mind. Like, comment, share, sub. Like I said, this is a forum video, so make sure to engage down in the comments. I'm gonna go catch the game. See you guys in the next one.